For us to be called to a scene, we would respond when there's obviously a fatality, or we receive information from emergency personnel at the scene that there's a likelihood or a possibility of serious injury. When we're responding, to the scene, we're often coming from home or coming from some other assignment or duty, and we're trying to get as much information as we can over the radio before we get there. But that information is not often enough to prepare you for what you're about to see. Many of these scenes they're gruesome, especially when you're talking about a person who's been killed in a vehicle collision. You're dealing with a cross-section of society, and that is, you're dealing with teenagers, as for an example, from a few years ago, that were coming home from Christmas caroling and rolled their vehicle off the side of the road, and the driver was seriously injured and the passenger was killed. You're talking about an elderly person attempting to go to the store at night to get some coffee, who's struck by a vehicle. For me, when arriving at a scene, I have to be careful not to personalize the scene, because you start to think, well, that could be my son, or that could be my wife, that could be, any of my loved ones. I have two boys that are teenage boys, one of whom just started driving. And rarely a day goes by that the thought doesn't cross my mind about what potentially could happen out there. As a teenager, my uncle was killed by a drunk driver in a head-on crash. He was on his way home from work. I still remember the feeling of finding out that my uncle, who I was close with, I spent my summers with him. I remember the feeling of finding out that he was killed, and not understanding at the time how it happened. And it wasn't obviously until later when investigators were able to provide us some information and some clarity on what happened. And it still resonates with me today when I show up at these scenes, or when I'm talking with family members, that I have felt this from both sides. This isn't something you easily get over, and it's important for us to provide as much as we can to those involved in these events, to try and help them understand and again, provide some closure so the healing can begin.